Welcome in, everybody. I'm Dan Wiederer, the Chicago Tribune, joined by my friend Herb Howard of the Bigs. We are about a week away from the NFL draft. Finally, Herb, can you believe we're crossing the bridge and we're finally going to get it past the pre-draft tornado and into the actual storm?
It's been a long journey, but it's been a fun one. It's not every year where the Bears get to be the center of the NFL in terms of having the number one pick and then what they're going to do with it, ultimately choosing to trade it early. And then locally, we get to kind of debate and go through all the process of what the ultimate plan is. So it's certainly seemed like it's been forever, but it's been a lot of fun.
I was explaining to someone last week that, 3 of the last 4 years, they haven't even had a first-round pick.
Right.
And so there's all this conversation going on for months and months and months, and the draft conversation always centers around the first round and specifically the top 10 or 12 picks. And all of a sudden you're just kind of on the outside looking in going, boy, that seems fun. This year we're actually right in the heart of it. And so there's been a lot more juice, or specifically over the last 2 months as this thing has kind of heated up.
Yeah, it made the combine more interesting, the owners' meetings more interesting for Chicago, local media. So it was definitely a good thing, man. I think that I tell people all the time, the most exciting thing that happened on the beat last year was after the Bears season was over, right? We were all sitting up in the booth at Soldier Field after that Week 18 game was over, watching the Houston Texans secure the number one spot for the Bears, and so that was probably the most exciting thing that happened. And so this offseason was as fun as the regular season.
Well, that's a good entry point into what I want to talk about here, because if we had stopped time on January 10th, a day or two after that moment that you talked about, and we realized the Bears had the number one overall pick and they had a chance to do something with it, and you said, okay, what if I told you that in April the Bears would turn that number one pick into a proven standout receiver for Justin Fields, 3 additional picks for the next 3 springs, and still be picking in the top 10? And not only that, Herb, they would have a chance potentially, with the way the conversation is going, to draft Jalen Carter at number 9 overall. There would have been a heavy amount of intrigue and wonder.
Sign me up for that, Dan.
Dizziness, right?
Yeah. Sign me up for that every time. That's really like a dream scenario, right? You come out of the season, you feeling relatively comfortable with where Justin is and where he's headed. Now can we get him a number one receiver? Okay, and then can we get a stud 3 tech in the middle of our defense? Can we secure future first-round picks going for, can we do all those things? And here they are, with a chance to be able to do that. And so I think this would have been a dream scenario. We talked about the possibility of Ryan Poles hitting this offseason, not the possibility, but the necessity of him hitting this offseason out of the park. If all those things that you just laid out were to come to fruition, you can't say he did anything less than hit it out of the park.
So let's talk specifically about Jalen Carter, because I think that is one of the most compelling storylines, if not the most compelling, in the first night of the draft next week, not only pertaining to what it means for the Bears, but just who is going to be the team that feels good about making a guy that most people believe is the most talented and most dominant prospect in the class the headliner of that class, understanding that this evaluation got a lot more complicated over the last couple months. First of all, with Jalen Carter's off-the-field legal issues, obviously pleads no contest to misdemeanor charges. First of all, with Jalen Carter's off-the-field legal issues, obviously pleads no of racing and reckless driving. And then you have obviously the pro day, which was less than ideal for Jalen Carter. He shows up a little bit overweight, out of shape, is unable to complete the on-field drills. And so now all of a sudden, you, as a front office, you're left with questions, concerns, things that you've got to sort out internally. Where are you at as the Bears are one of those teams that has to kind of sift through that?
No, I think that, it could play out in their favor, right, in terms of them trading back and then him kind of sliding down to them. Certainly not ideal, pre-draft work for him. But if he slides down for the Bears, then I think it's good. I would still feel comfortable taking the kid. I really, really would. I mean, it's certainly not ideal situation with him having the off-the-field issue that he had, tragic situation that it was. And I think we've talked about it before, that for me, it's more of a concern about his inability to compartmentalize, to say, okay, I am dealing with something off the field, but I'm still going to be a professional and prepared to perform. And his inability to do that leading up to his pro day is more concerning for me than what actually took place off the field. That being said, if he's gotten back on track in this process, if he's gotten to his 30 visits and he's back where he needs to be in terms of weight and he's been able to perform, I would feel good about taking the kid. The tape doesn't lie. The kid is absolutely dominant at his best. There isn't anybody better than him, certainly not at that position. And the Bears absolutely have to have a difference maker at that position. And so you talk about a guy who would come in, instantly be a difference maker on your defense. I would go ahead and pull the trigger. And then you got to start to look ahead of the Bears in the draft 1 through 8 and say, who else might pull the trigger on this kid and how do they feel about him? How do they evaluate the off the field stuff? How do they evaluate his inability to compartmentalize? And so if he's there at 9, I would pull the trigger on the kid, but I think there may be a couple other teams ahead of them that may do the same.
One of those teams is picking at number 6, and they're the Detroit
Yes, they
Lions.
are.
They're in your division. They've got Aiden Hutchinson. They've got Aleem McNeil, and they've got a chance to make their defense a lot more disruptive. And that's got to give you a little bit of, I hope they don't fall in love with them and turn them into a long-term difference maker. I think one of the key kind of components, particularly when you get to know Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles a little bit better and understand how much they rely on trust, is how can they answer that trust question with Jalen Carter? And that's not just about how he handles his business off the field. It's can you trust him to be there not only as a rookie, but year 2, year 3, year 4. Ideally, you're going to try to pay him before he gets to year 5. And now how does he handle all of that? And so that it's a long-term projection and conversation that you have to have internally. That's never easy. There's no easy answers. It's why the draft has a fail rate higher than any other profession that would be allowed to have a fail rate at that level. And so it's just going to be fascinating to see kind of how they, navigate that trust and reliability conversation with a player whose tape doesn't lie.
Yeah, I think you got to evaluate your current locker room too. I think that's a part of the equation as well. You're talking about a very young team, not a whole lot of, established veteran leadership on this team. If you were talking about bringing in, a guy with some questionable concerns off the field in terms of his decision making, but also his motor and work ethic off the field, I think that if you were bringing him into a locker room that said maybe it has an Akeem Hicks or Khalil Mack, or you go back to a Julius Peppers, and if you bring him to that type of situation, then you probably feel a little bit better about it, right? He's going to be next to Akeem Hicks. You put him with a guy like that, and he'll be fine. But you're talking about bringing him into a locker room that's got young leadership. Everybody there on this team that matters is 25 or below, with the exception of Eddie Jackson. And so you're talking about young guys leading this team. And so that raises some concerns when you don't have a lot of veteran leadership around him to kind of bring him into. That being said, I do think that these young kids are mature. I do think that they love the game. And they for the most part, they seem to understand, how to keep the main thing. And if you can get him into that culture, I think he can do well. But Chicago is not a city that you want to just dump a young, immature millionaire into, right? It's not. That's cause for concern there. And so all of the concern is legitimate. It's certainly warranted. That being said, if you've done your homework, which the Bears certainly have, and you're comfortable with it, I'm fine with them taking him at 9.
At the owners' meetings, Ryan described the locker room as young and impressionable, and I think he's kind of has some concerns about how do we build this up the right way, how do we add the right core pieces. And I had someone I trust in the league say, you're not voting yes or no on Jalen Carter at number 9. You're choosing off a menu that has other options for you, right? And so that's part of the decision that goes into this for the Bears. It's not like, is this a simple black and white situation with Jalen Carter where you say, yes, we can trust him, no, we can't. It's, can we factor that in with the idea that we could grab Paris Johnson and stabilize our offensive line, that we could grab, a Peter Skoronski, that we could grab a cornerback like Devin Witherspoon or Christian Gonzalez. And so some of this is going to kind of hinge upon what that menu looks like after the first 8 picks are off the board, and who are those players that, as a general manager, as an assistant GM like Ian Cunningham, as head coach, who are those players that you lay your head down on the pillow at night and say, yeah, like we know we're going to get.
I'm not going to get that 3 a.m. call for him.
We don't like sleepless nights, right? Like, and so that's a factor too that I think is kind of an interesting thing to consider as well.
Yeah, it's a lot more. It's not making that decision in a vacuum. It's a lot of things. It's his personal physical ability on the field, and then it's everything else, and then you weigh that out with other people's, total package, and maybe their physical ability or their ceiling is a little lower, but their safety is a little bit more. You know what I mean? And that factors into it. It has to. It just does when you're making that type of investment in a particular prospect. So that's all very, very legitimate. He's brought that upon himself. He's going to have to deal with that, whether that causes him to slide down the board from where he was, mostly projected as a top 3 pick to, now maybe he's top 6 pick, top 9 pick. He's going to have to. That's his own issue. But for the Bears, I just got to trust that they've done their homework on him, and if he's there at 9 and they do choose to take him, it's because they feel comfortable bringing him into Hallis Hall.
He has an experienced super agent in Drew Rosenhaus playing the game right now and trying to drum up the
Yeah.
hype so that teams know that if they want
Yeah.
him, they better come get him. You and I are going to feel really foolish when he gets taken at number 3 by the Cardinals, and we go, boy, we just wasted 2 months thinking about what it would be like for him to be in a
To get him
Bears
at
uniform.
9.
And here we are. But look, like, again, the tape doesn't lie. One of the verbs that Daniel Jeremiah used that I thought was fascinating, because you never hear this on an NFL scouting report, was teleport. He said it's like almost like he teleports from gap to gap. That's the type of agility and explosion and burst that he has that you just don't see. And so you can understand what the appeal to the talent is. And now it's just about answering all those other questions.
Yeah, and he's able to do it without losing any power, right? So it's one thing to jump from one gap to the next, but he's able to do that while maintaining that power to push the next guy deep into the backfield or get past him with speed. And so he's got everything that you're looking for when you talk about these dominant 3 techniques that you need to have in this defense. Now, I mean, the Bears have played this defense for a long time around here, with the exception of a few years. And so we understand what that looks like and what needs to happen there for your Tommy Harrises of the world or your Warren Sapps. So that we understand what needs to take place at that position. And that guy has it. You see it on tape. You see it with his hands. You see it with his arms, his legs, his lower body, how strong he is. He's stout. We talked about keeping those interior linemen off of those athletic linebackers behind him with Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards. Neither of those guys do very, very well once they get engaged. That's a lot of linebackers, not a huge knock on them, but their best asset is to be able to diagnose, read, and run. And so you got to be able to keep them clean to do that. And I think he's a guy that can do that in a number of ways. You got a guy like Billings who he can do that just by being stout and just holding up at the point of attack, where he can just take on 2 guys. But Jalen Carter can do that, but he can also do that by just applying pressure. You cannot ignore him. You can't just push him off and then climb to the second level. You have to stay with him because he'll be in your backfield making plays. And so that's another way to keep those guys clean. He's got everything that you want. And again, dream scenario for the Bears to be able to move back to 9, pick up some first-round picks, pick up some second-round picks, get a number 1 wide receiver, and still find that dominant 3 tech. That would be phenomenal.
Well, we finally hit the home stretch of the pre-draft, so pretty soon these questions will have answers. Speculation will turn into reality, and we'll figure out which direction we're going. That's Herb Howard. I'm Dan Wiederer. Thanks for joining us. Like, subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon with a lot more Bears and a lot more pre-draft content.